Welcome back to the TPM Social Club. We're happy to have you. It's been a few months since our last episode, but my name is Josh Kovensky, and I'm here with Joe Ragazzo. Welcome back, Joe. How are you doing?
I'm good, Josh. How are you? It's been a while. Good to be back.
Yeah, no, it is. So I think we're excited to do this for real. We had like a test run back in the fall where we released a couple episodes in like October-ish. Um, and we had guests on, but I think Joe, the idea for this that we really want is for this to just be like a less formal uh, show. I mean, where we just kind of talk about news, culture, sports, politics, whatever, and just kind of have that. But yeah, how do you feel about restarting it?
I'm excited. There's a lot going on. I think one one thing I'm excited to use this show for, I think, is bring on some guests who have expertise um, that is kind of a little bit outside of TPM's wheelhouse. We'll bring on some other journalists. We'll bring on other people, and this will also be just an opportunity to talk about things that again like are a little bit outside of TPM's sort of bailiwick. I think I'm especially interested in it feels like increasingly politics spills into other areas of our life, whether that's sports or culture, whatever, just daily things in a way that it didn't used to. And so I think this show could be a way to touch on those other things that are not like just policy or campaigns, some of these other things. So I'm excited to explore all that stuff.
Yeah, and I mean I'm with you on that, and I also just think like doing it in a easier like conversational way
Yeah.
uh, makes it feel less suffocating.
Hmm.
Because everything being political, like I mean, this was happening on the right under Biden, where like for a while, people conservatives weren't drinking Budweiser because supposedly it was like the pro-trans beer, right?
Yeah.
Ridiculous things like that. But I mean, it just makes everything kind of exhausting and suffocating. So hopefully, we can find a way to like talk about things that does not fall into that trap. Not that we would
Yeah.
ever tell our listeners not to drink Budweiser because of some kind of gender thing, but uh, you know,
When you're in
rather
it every day, like when you're in it every day the way you are, or the way we both are, it could be tricky not to fall into those traps. You know what I mean? Like you're in it, and everything you're reading is just in that political maelstrom. And so yeah, it's difficult to extricate yourself sometimes.
yeah, and maybe not that Budweiser trap specifically, but there are many traps into which one can fall. And it seems like a lot of this is a feature of social media, which is quite addictive. I've heard, and that yeah,
Yeah. So let's just get right into this. What Josh is talking about, what he's alluding to, is this week, or actually, well, technically last week, a jury in New Mexico found that social media conglomerate Meta, Facebook, Instagram, is harmful to children's mental health and actually violates a state law. So this immediately conjured up um, sort of or harken back to major landmark lawsuits against the tobacco industry, and in the sense of like, here's this product that people think is addictive and can be harmful, and it needs to be regulated. And this is the first instance of somebody winning a lawsuit in the United States, at least, against a social media platform, and their argument being this is so addictive that it's damaging to my mental health. And a jury was sympathetic to that, and I personally find that I think this is a good thing. I'm excited to follow this issue. I want to see. I think there's 40 states that currently have some sort of lawsuit or in place, and so I'm excited to follow to see where this goes, because Josh, we work in media. We see social media up front every day. We have to use it, but I think I'm not over my skis here saying that when you use it every day, you can see the evils. You can see the bad parts of it, and we see them every day.
yeah. I mean, this happened to me yesterday, where I foolishly posted something on X. I don't think my post itself was foolish, but the act of engaging with that platform was. and they react. And I looked at it 2 hours later, and there were like 500 like right wingers calling me an idiot. And that can happen to you if you're not careful, or if you are careful. And it's interesting seeing a case where like the harm is kind of quantified. And I think one of the interesting things there is like, social media companies for the longest time have been protected by what's called Section 230. So the idea is that they're not liable for the content on their platforms. So if some guy, calls me an idiot on Twitter or X, he is not like Elon Musk or X is not liable for that statement in any way, right? But with the this like case New Mexico did was it said that because the way that the platforms like kind of combine everything to the algorithms, like the way they push it out to you, they are liable for that. And that's really interesting, right? Because that is actually kind of what addicts you, or at least addicts me. Like I feel like we've all had this experience of opening up like X or Instagram or whatever, and you look at the clock and it's like half an hour later, and you just like
Yeah.
lost like you just like lost that time. And that is the algorithm like sucking you in. So it's like it's super interesting to me that like that is the that's like what the case identified as like the really harmful thing, and it's also like what they were found to like not have immunity for, because that also is like the secret sauce. Like if you think about like TikTok, like that's really the thing that is like kind of heroin and gets people sucked in. Like it's the algorithm. It's
Yeah.
like it's how it's like feeding on like your interests and like needs, and pushing stuff at you. So like the idea that can be something that they're like liable for, I think is like super important and kind of crazy.
It's one of those stories that really you read what the leadership is saying, um, and it's your classic like, "Are you dumb or do you think I'm dumb?" One of them has to be the case because Adam Mosseri, the head of Instagram, he testified back in February that he didn't believe that people can be clinically addicted to social media platforms. And it's like, dude, you could be addicted to literally anything. Like, addiction is not the province of drugs or alcohol or sex. Like, you can get addicted to any behavior. If a behavior provides some sort of feedback that you find pleasurable or enjoyable, and you want to keep going back to that well and keep getting that, that's an addiction. Like when you can't live without it, when you want to go back to it, when you're find yourself looking at your phone scrolling and you don't even really know why and you can't put it down, or when you want to go to bed and your phone is right there and you have to look at it. So I found I when I saw that he said that statement again, it's like, are you willfully just being obtuse because you know that addiction is actually the business model, or do you really not believe that? In which case, like, do we have a societal misunderstanding of what addiction actually is? Like, probably. I mean, probably. Because I want to just touch on the algorithm part that you brought up, because I do think this really all comes down to the algorithms, because the platforms know they can measure, and we've seen stories on it in the past, that anger is going to get people going more than like good news. So the algorithms are going to they're going to favor angry behavior. They just are, because
Yeah.
that's what gets more engagement. And the other thing about these platforms are, um the kinds of things that they promote are going to be intrinsically tied to the advertising dollars they get there. And so much of the advertising dollars are going to go to the people, to the influencers, who have an incentive to present themselves in sort of false ways. Like they there's we've all seen, or we're aware of videos where influencers will demonstrate how with certain lighting and with certain posing they can look a certain way. And so you're kind of like hacking young kids brains into thinking that there's a certain type of beauty, a certain type of lifestyle that exists, that is attainable, and that anyone can get, and it's not there. It's not. And then those kids are not, when they the disappointment of not being like these people they idolize just creates this vicious feedback loop of like, I can't stop looking at my phone. I'm looking at people who, and I want to be like them, but I can't be like them. And all the while Instagram is able to make money off of this stuff. And that doesn't even touch on like the what I would consider maybe the more direct evils of just like exploitation and trafficking, right? And those are like much more serious than what I'm describing, but they're all toxic. So yeah, I think this is a really good thing. I think it's auspicious going forward. Um, And I hope that we do have some sort of tobacco like reckoning where this stuff is much more heavily regulated, bans on advertising, whatever it takes.
I mean, I think it'd be great to get like somebody on the show, honestly, Joe, who could like
Yeah.
talk about all this. Because even what you were just saying with like influencers, like how they try to like market themselves in a certain way to like maximize attention. It's almost like it's crazy because from one like side, I see that and I can see how like the platforms are incentivizing that. But when you actually like meet like an influencer or like talk to them, like it becomes immediately clear how like their brains have been melted by the internet more than anybody else you'll ever meet. Like it is like they are just completely captured by it. And I think you can see this like throughout the culture at this point, just like how people like kind of present themselves, just like in reality. Like you can tell when somebody is like very like addicted to Instagram or something, or
Yeah.
like to whatever TikTok, whatever it is, or if they have opinions that you can tell are kind of like cribbed from X. But like in some sense, I think the people who like are the power users of these platforms who like really gain a lot of like power and influence are also it's the biggest kind of like victims in a sense. Like they're addicted, their lives are just like completely integrated into it. And I'm curious to hear what you think because I like TPM. One thing that's great is that we don't like, even though we are like digital, and we don't like own a printing press or anything like that. Like we do not, I think, give in to those like incentives. Like we do a good job of not doing that. But it's also true that like there are so many digital media outlets and just people who like now publish articles on X or like do like TikTok videos or YouTube videos or whatever it is. They are totally like captured by like the incentives that these platforms create. And I'm
Yeah.
curious like what you think those like what those are. Like how does it like change, like how does it like affect how people like talk or communicate?
So are you asking like how the social media itself kind of like changes people?
Yeah, or even just like news. Like I mean, just like commentators on anything really. Like
Well, I think for one thing, you could start off with the selection of news that people see, right? One of the things with the algorithms is that they're going to promote certain news that people find engaging, and essentially when you that mechanism of the platforms kind of curating what people see, kind of serving as the gatekeepers, I think that in and of itself is dangerous and harmful because it creates the impression that you're autonomously deciding what news you consume, but unless you're literally typing in where you want to go to get it, like youtube.com slash like whatever, if you're just relying on what it sends to you via an algorithm, then you're kind of ceding your autonomy to the algorithms. So that's like the first thing, is just like what you encounter um is chosen by these people. But I think the biggest thing is that technology, any technology, is going to take the shape of the society in which it exists, and it's going to adopt the incentives and values of the society in which it exists. And so in the United States, you say, well, what does that mean? I think what I mean is the values that really make things go and make decisions. The ones that you can look at and they're like predictive and explanatory. And the number one, the two biggest values that are predictive and explanatory in the United States are and wealth and beauty. Really, we like to say it's hard work and it's picking yourself up by your bootstraps, or all these other things, but it's really like if you have a lot of money, you have a lot of power, and we value like having a lot of money. It's built into the laws, it's built into our regulations. And so I think what you see on these platforms is they emphasize how to make money and how to be pretty, and that changes the decisions people are making in life. I think it directly contributes to sort of the rise of like bag culture, where if you grow up seeing people, if you grew up during the Great Recession and you're like, what am I going to do with my life? And you turn on YouTube and you see like someone teaching you how to drop ship and make a ton of money. It's not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just that you might have like outsized expectations about like how much money you can make on the internet, not really like just basically arbitraging. And then you get into the world of like just actually scamming, making content and like figuring out like
yeah,
content farms to make ad revenue. So I think it's really those two things that I see. It's really three. It's like status, wealth, and beauty, and they're all interrelated. And I think they just present people with like a toxic view of like what is important in the world and what is not important in the world.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, have you seen these polls? Like, because Gen Z is the first generation to grow up with this as just like their main means of like social media and
yeah,
kind of communication. Because even like we like older millennials, like I feel like I remember vaguely a time before the internet, and definitely before social media. But you've seen these polls, and I don't know how like I haven't like independently verified any of this, but that like the number one desired profession amongst Gen Z is influencer, and the amount of money that they think they need to like make it year by year is like mid hundreds of thousands, mid six figures.
yeah.
And that's just like I think that's totally like reflective of what you're saying. uh, I mean, it's kind of
I
what
think it's interesting. Like it's interesting to look back at I don't know, like these cultural moments where like what people are studying in school are fascinating to me. You have these inflection points based on some sort of cultural phenomenon. Like I feel like when Wall Street the movie came out, all of a sudden like people wanted to go be like a investment banker, and then
yeah,
and Social Network comes out, and all of a sudden people want to work in Silicon Valley. And I don't know, I don't know what is it, the Tate brothers or like Mr. Beast? People are like, now I want to be like an influencer. Um and yeah, it's just very strange. I think it's sad too because it's like we're getting away. I don't want to get too lectury here, but like people forget that like an economic system is like capitalism. The point of capitalism is not actually to make money. The point, in theory, the idea was that by people wanting to make money, it would result in a equitable distribution of goods and services. But now we're so far past that that people don't even think you have to offer a good or a service. Like you just make money. That's like the only thing you do, and it's like respectable to just scam people. and
right.
and like that's the other thing with influencing, this is the last point I'll turn it over, is I just feel like, and we'll talk about a little bit about the economy later, at some point, like doesn't the bottom have to drop out of this? Like are the influencers actually delivering that much return to their advertisers? I don't know. I mean, this maybe is a good question again for to have on like someone to talk about this stuff. But like, I feel like there's got to be a bubble there. Like, there's
I
no
also
way it
think
could be
it's like
sustainable.
grossly unequal. Like the percent of influencers who actually like make a living off this, I think, is really small
It's
compared to the
got to
number of
be like,
people who are, yeah, like really like microscopic. But like also that being said, like I think sometimes like especially this is really visible in New York City, where sometimes you'll be walking down the street and there'll just be like a random like restaurant or cafe or something, and like there'll be like a line going like 3 blocks, and like the
yeah,
answer invariably is that like it was featured on some Instagram account or like TikTok or whatever, and like it like blew up for that reason, right? So like I think
yeah.
like I don't know, like and it must like that must be a whole business, like advertising firms like telling businesses, okay, we can get you that kind of attention by placing it with like X influencer or like whatever Instagram account. I don't know.
That's a good point. There's also, and you know what? The opposite side of that coin is, um, you go to some countries, some places. Like I was in Santorini for my anniversary one year. Blessed to be able to go to Greece. Santorini is just like an influencer hangout. I mean, there's a reason why it's all over Instagram with the white like architecture and the blue. Like everyone there is just posing for pictures. It's like built into the experience that everyone there, not everyone, but like most people there are like influencers. And to the point where it's like they kind of want everyone to like chill out. Like it's becoming like overpopulated. And you see the similar thing with tourism in general, but it adds like another level when you're trying to like walk around and enjoy yourself and there's just people taking pictures and they have selfie sticks everywhere. It just I don't know, there's something culturally weird about it. I don't know what else to say.
And what's crazy about it is like so with politics, for example, I was like talking to somebody a week or two ago who was saying that like a bunch of the big like political communications firms, like that political advertising firms, they're now trying to figure out how to like basically make this work to their benefit.
Yeah.
Because like if you just see like a old kind of style like 30 or 45-second campaign ad like on TV, that's very like analog, right? Like that's like
Yeah.
it's like like a movie reel or something, and like a at this point like it's very dated. So what they're trying to do is figure out like, okay, how do we like place stuff like through like local influencers? So like, who is like the Kenosha, Wisconsin like influencer that we can like place like a political ad with? What's crazy though is that there's no requirement that influencers disclose who is paying them, or like who is basically is the
Mm.
who's like at least for politics, like for, like who's like what politicians sponsoring them. So it's like a total like kind of black box in terms of who's like paying who. to take what position. What is not a black box, however, but also is tied to courts, is this Afroman case that we wanted to discuss in our culture segment. Listeners may know him as a rapper from the 2000s, whose popularity has maybe declined recently, but he's in the news because he successfully fended off a defamation case. Uh, it's a bizarre story. Basically, what happened is a few years ago, a local Ohio police department where he lives raided his house and seized, as part of the raid, $400. The whole like basis for doing this was called into question. It wasn't clear that they really had any reason for doing the raid in the first place or seizing the money. And to protest this, Afroman released a bunch of like rap songs about the raid, and also criticizing and arguably humiliating the individual officers who executed the search warrants. Or I don't know if it was a search warrant, but who did do the raid. So they then sued him for defamation. And Afroman, after showing up to trial every day wearing this like really kind of like this basically suit made of like American flags, won. And I think the case was like quite undercovered. It's a big failure of the media that this was not more widely covered. But he did win. So Joe, what do you think about all this? What does this say about the state of freedom of speech in America?
Well, first of all, I think it's important for the listener to know that where this took place is, I believe it's Adams County, Ohio, which is south, south by southwest Ohio. Basically, it's not all the way southwest, but it's a little southwest. And this is like it's got to be like 98% white. When I saw that Afro Man was living in Adams County, I was like, wow. But also, I mean, the only thing anyone would really know from Adams County probably is it's home to the Great Serpent Mounds. That is what you go to Adams County for. That's Native American burial. Well, I don't know actually if they're burial grounds, but Native American Serpent Mound. So that's like where this happened. Okay, so you can imagine, um, Afroman's a bit of a fish out of water, and so he's actually started selling merchandise too about this, which we'll put in the show notes. They were like, it's a shirt with a pound cake on it, a lemon pound cake, and Peter Griffin, who, Afroman. I think what he's getting at here is that the police officers who are also on the shirt, he put the police officers on the shirt, resemble Peter Griffin from the show Family Guy. Um, Not the most flat. That's not, you don't wake up and hope someone compares you to Peter Griffin. I think he also compared them to Quasimodo. So he was really coming. He was really coming for them. Um, but ultimately, I think it's great that he won because it was a BS search, right? I mean, they go in the house. It's pointless. Probably because the guy raps and sings about weed all the time. If you don't know Afroman, his most famous song, it was "Because I Got High." Okay, um, and he gets high. I'll tell you, I saw him live. I went to Ohio University. I saw him live in Athens, and maybe he was too high that day. I'll admit it was one of the worst it's one of the worst things I ever saw. And I like the song, I like Afro Man, but the show was lacking. I'll just put it that way. Um, but it's good that he beat the police because this was BS, and we need to see more of this kind of thing. I'm glad he
Yeah,
took him on too.
well, yeah, he did take them on. Also, the like charges they rated him on were there was a search for kidnapping and drug trafficking, and they like found no evidence of either. And it's like not clear. It's never clear to me like why they like even went in thinking they like. I don't know if it was like the because I got high was like the evidence of like drug trafficking,
Like
or
a
like
20-year-old song,
yeah, right.
30-year-old song.
It's funny that he showed up to the concert like he like barely performed because he was like too stoned. That's great. It's like very
Yeah,
encouraging. Yeah,
yeah, it's a form follows function there for sure, for
yeah.
sure.
It also I think is like kind of funny because we were talking about earlier about how like everything is so politicized, and like it's like the culture is like kind of split, right? And it's like really easy to like clock, unfortunately, right? Like what like is going to perhaps like be part of like somebody's like political tendency based on like what
Yeah,
they're doing. But I did kind of feel like this was like this sort of crossed that gap a little bit. There of course is like a back the blue element to all of this that people, but like I still sort of felt like I saw people from both sides cheering this on. Um,
Yeah, I
I,
think I think one of the sort of holes, or like the vulnerabilities for the Back to Blue movement, is every once in a while you get these sort of like Keystone Cops episodes of just like bumbling fools. Another example of this might be, although it's a sheriff, and sheriffs are always dubious to begin with, but there was that story about what Savannah Guthrie, right? And Savannah Guthrie's mom was missing, and they didn't know where she was. And forgive me, I'm kind of going off memory here, but there was a story basically like the sheriff's department got to the scene of the crime first. And then when
right.
the FBI showed up, they were like, "What did you guys do? Like, what was this amateur hour nonsense? You wasted our time." And I mentioned that just because you see these episodes of the police in these small podunk towns sometimes, or a sheriff, and it reminds you that these are people who often have a ton of power simply by being somewhere, um, with a low population. These are places where there might not be a lot of news coverage. So it takes someone famous like an Afroman to highlight a police abuse like this, right? Because like this could happen to like a normal person, and we're never going to hear about it, and they're probably going to lose. They're not going to win they might not even fight the lawsuit or whatever. And so I think, although it's like really, it's like a funny thing, very humorous, inspiring almost in a way, it highlights like a real problem. Like, what if Afro Man wasn't famous? Like, what would have happened here? And I think that's like just an important point, something to point out.
Totally. It's also crazy that because like basically, if you're a public official and that's like from the president to local cop, uh, you're like it's not like everything is fair game in terms of like defamation, but under the idea is that you're working for the public, and so people can speak about you in public, and that's not always going to be flattering, right?
Yeah, right.
And so it's kind of wild that they hired like a attorneys to like personally to sue him. And it is true that I think like one of the cops got called like Afroman called him a pedophile. Like
Yeah,
it was like pretty out there. Like to be
yeah.
fair, but to the cops, but and Afroman was obviously very angry, but like I think that's also important to keep in mind.
It's art, art,
It's
freedom of
art.
speech. It's art.
It's fine. I think our next segment, though, we were going to move on to international affairs and maybe perhaps on a more somber note, shed light on something that's weirdly been ignored, which was the blockade of Cuba.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about this story because I think it's like crazy. If you just say out loud what is happening, the United States has a blockade of another country, Cuba, and the people there have like they have no electricity. They're low on supply, like basic supplies, like food and water. Um, Ironically, the people that came to help was Russia. Like Trump, one of the winners of the Iran war continues to be Russia, it seems. Trump allowed them in to supply oil and supplies to Cuba, because Cuba, I think I read something like they can only produce 40% of their own energy needs. So they need help. And I just this is, I think, one of the more acute examples in my mind of just the cruelty and sort of the neocon wing getting the best it's like a combination of like the neocons who have wanted to to take action against Cuba probably for 40 years, and Trump's sort of id, personal politics domination. We just took out Venezuela, we're just going to go around the world getting rid of leaders we don't like. um and it's manifesting in just absolute depravity. And I you know just want to talk about it because it's crazy and more people should know what's going on there.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. And the only things I would add is I just think like Trump is such an '80s guy. Like a lot of the things he's obsessed with, like free trade or even like Iran, like they're all very much like concerns from like the '80s. And I think Cuba, like the revolution that Fidel Castro's revolution was much more. recent back then. Also, he has Marco Rubio in his cabinet who somehow managed to maneuver himself from like being like under really intense suspicion at the start of his administration by like MAGA people who thought that he was going to betray MAGA, to being like one of the most influential members of the cabinet. And as you said, like managed to kind of smuggle in, not even smuggle in, but basically, because I think that actually, because I kind of think it's wrong when people say that like Trump is like not a neocon. Like I think the first term showed that he's just as aggressive as any of them, but like,
Yeah.
who basically managed to like, take that energy and put it towards something that he cares about because his family, he is of Cuban descent. He's from South Florida, and that community has been focused on this forever, basically since the revolution in the 50s. So I think that's all coming together. I am curious though, why do you think this isn't getting attention? Because it's weird to me. Part of me is confused at how anything gets attention at this point. I just feel like because media is so fragmented, like this kind of sense that you would have like even 5 or 10 years ago that like one story is just like dominating everything and that people are just like really like concerned. I feel like even with Iran, like that just doesn't happen. Like it's just like it's all way more attenuated. But maybe that's my own the fact. Maybe that's me being jaded. Who knows?
No, because I don't. Well, I think there's like news fatigue generally. I think there's just a lot like when there's just I keep thinking back on when Steve Bannon said the famous flood the zone with shit. I mean, they really do that. Like that is a real strategy. There's like so much happening with this administration at any given time, and so much of it is nonsense. It's just utter nonsense. But you have to filter through it anyway to find what is important. And then, but at the same time, there's tons of important stuff. I kind of, Trump has this way of saying terrible things in a humorous way. It's just out loud. Like the other day, he said, the lawyers told me we can't call this military action in Iran a war. If I call it a war, then Congress has to approve it. So we're calling it a military action. And he says it almost like, ha, how clever, how cute is that? But, you talk about like, why aren't people talking about Cuba? The whole Ukraine conflict, as I'm sure you know better than anyone, having reported there and covered it, that's on the back burner.
Yeah.
You don't really talk about it anymore. The Iran stuff has sort of come to dominate, at least in a foreign affairs sense, like what we're talking about, because I think it so directly impacts the United States of America and people in the United States. I think the fact that there's potential for boots on the ground in the Middle East, it just people in America just think like, here we go again, Iraq, Afghanistan, going all the way back to like the early '90s and those conflicts. Whereas with Cuba, it's like I'll say the American media apparatus, and I'm using it in the most broad terms here. I don't mean the news. I mean everything, movies, culture, have done a really good job of making Cuba seem like a backward Soviet, you know, nation that is basically bad and wrong and that the United States needs to fix. And so I feel like a lot of people just either don't care, they're not aware, or they think maybe actually what we're doing is good. Um, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but
But no, to me, Joe, that is one of the sort of secrets of the Trump 2 presidency is that there are a lot of people who aren't like vocally supportive of the various things that he's done over the past year, but they're like passively, like tacitly kind of like on board.
yeah,
And I think that isn't just like Iran or Cuba. Like it's also like, the big ICE raids, like basically the mass deportation campaign, this like really kind of like all out war on anything that like is remotely connected to like DEI or woke.
yeah,
I think a lot of that stuff, even though there aren't people who are going to go out there and like make these like and like really vocally vociferously support it, there's a lot of people like I mean, including on the center and center left, who I think are in some ways like who like are happy to kind of quietly accommodate it. And I think that
yeah,
Cuba, the foreign policy stuff is a great example of that. Yeah,
yeah. I agree. I agree. I mean, Venezuela, I thought was a good example where it's like we just went into a country and just, I mean, kidnapped the head of the country,
yeah,
and you have people saying like, well, I wouldn't have done it, but it's one bad guy that's out of the world. It's like, wait, what are we talking about here? You can't just go into places and like take their leaders. Like, I don't care how bad. Like, I mean, unless there's like some sort of aggressive, belligerent behavior that this country is taking against other countries or something like that, right? Like, I mean, we're not talking about going in, like, saying that we shouldn't have kidnapped Maduro is not the same as saying, like, it was a good decision to let Hitler go at Munich, right? Like you don't always have to intervene in other countries. And I think that is sort of what, like, is driving people nuts is I thought this was a non-interventionist presidency. At least these are people on the right. Like,
Yeah.
I think we knew going in that to the extent Trump said that he was, he didn't want to go to war and stuff. He's paying lip service to what people want to hear.
I mean, he's a salesman. He's been a salesman his whole
Yeah,
life. He tells people what they
exactly.
want to hear. Like, yeah,
Exactly, exactly. But there is this idea that, like, if you ever go after, like, any strong man, or I don't even wanna say a strong man because we don't go after the strong men, really. But, if you go after these leaders and you take them out, that it's, like, always like you took out a bad guy and it's an automatically a good thing for the world, and it's like, no, it's not, right? It's not like that's not what we should be doing. I don't know. The
it's
people have
also like
sovereignty.
they do, and also it like weirdly. So this is where. So one thing that people get mad at Trump about is that everything is kind of about him, right? And
Yeah.
uh, it kind of like infects how he thinks about governing the country because he is just sort of like I'm America, I'm in charge of it, done. And that's where you part of like where you get there's like a deeper story about like the conservative movement moving towards authoritarianism we can talk about, but like that's part of why people are so freaked out by a lot of the things he does is that he just genuinely thinks that he just thinks the power should be concentrated in him.
Yeah.
Um, but the weird like way I think this is sometimes expressed in the foreign policy things is like he also seems to think that that's how other countries work. It's like if you kill the
Mhm.
Ayatollah of Iran, then that's it, done. But like there's a
Yeah.
whole system beneath him that is going to keep operating. And so now we're like getting
Yeah.
sucked into this like interminable conflict. Same thing with Venezuela. It's like okay, it's like they say it's like okay, we found Delcy Rodriguez, like somebody to replace Maduro, but it's like is that I don't know. It's like it seems like we don't really know yet if that is actually going to be if that's going to play out the way like Trump seems to think it's going to play out. That all of a sudden we have this like ally who's in charge of the country, or not really ally, more like someone who just happens to just sort of be willing to be subordinate. And like with Cuba, like it's like the things that like you mentioned like the letting that Russian tanker through, but it's like what's weird about that is like Trump keeps talking about regime change. He like keeps talking about like he's like suggested a few times that we're going to invade. But again, it's like not clear like what any of that would accomplish. How would they replace it? Ron DeSantis was out like a week or two ago talking about how he's concerned that there's going to be migrants coming across the Caribbean, the ocean from Cuba and Florida, which is
Yeah,
happening.
where do you think they're gonna go? I mean,
Yeah, like it's all really screwed up. And it's also the other thing like it always makes me think of is remember under Obama how that was like in 2014, 2015. That was like sometime during a second term. That was like one of his big things in foreign policy. He was like, all right, like we have we're like reestablishing relations with Cuba, moving away.
yeah,
And it's like there's so many things that felt at that time like real sort of change or that I think felt like maybe they'd be permanent. And now here we are like 10, 12 years later. And it's just, we've just gone like in completely the opposite direction to such a degree that it's like beyond
yeah,
to imagine anything being different.
yeah. It's yeah. Um, yeah. I was thinking. I wanted the your point you made about how Trump seems to think he like projects his world beliefs and just assumes everyone thinks the same. I was thinking about that specific thing with Iran, the way it's like it's almost like organized crime, where it's like these like organizations build themselves to know that if you take out the head that the rest of the organization will continue. Like everyone on earth knows that that's how you structure smart organizations now, except someone like Trump who thinks the whole world is about him, right? Like it's just so characterologically different, and the fact that this one guy who views the world different from basically everybody else is making all these decisions, it's just, I mean, it's nuts. Even the way he infects the people around him to where they start saying crazy things as if they're normal, like how Josh Marshall highlighted this the other day. Like the Strait of Hormuz might just never be open now.
Yeah.
Like it, and it's like okay, well, we just went in there and like we just broke it. And it goes to your point about like going back to the Obama administration. It's like we're just going away around breaking things. In some cases, they're going back to like how they were at this, before Obama or whatever. And in some cases, they're going back much further than that, like way, way, way back. A lot of the environmental protections being rolled back are like that. So yeah, it's just going around breaking stuff.
Yeah, I mean that is exactly what they're doing, and the one thing that's also strange about all of this is, so you remember like in January, I think it was, whatever, it was like in the aftermath of Trump not getting the Nobel Prize, where he like texted the Prime Minister of Norway, like, because you didn't give me the Nobel Prize, this would have been a year of peace, but now it's going to be a year of war. Something, yeah. And so it's like, I think one thing that's so hard about all this is like it's almost like we have to take that seriously. Is
Yeah.
like, was that really the psychological like thing that pushed him to this? But it also, I think, more like seriously, like, you know at least in America, it's like it's sort of things are contained domestically, and there's like a political system with two parties, and so I think that just kind of contorts everything, like around Trump. But like internationally, people aren't bound by that. Like the Iranian government can just keep shooting at the Strait of Hormuz or Israel or the American bases in the Gulf as long as they want, right? Or the Cubans can do whatever they're going to do. Like basically, all these other countries can act, and they have a lot more freedom of action than people within the United States. And so it's like, it's like Josh Marshall's point. It's like Trump is kind of in the situation now where like he doesn't get to like dictate the outcomes. He doesn't get to like really control the process, and that could like really damage the country and like kind of bring the consequences of this home to people in a way that like we might experience over the next month or two.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good segue into the next
Yeah.
something we want to talk about, which is money, basically economics a little bit, because the oil prices are out of control, and gas is up over $4 a gallon for the first time in years. And they say, I don't know what the little cliche saying is, but basically, gas prices determine presidencies. It's one thing that just inescapable, and people will tie to whoever's in office no matter what. And um I was looking at Nate Silver, the Silver Bulletin. Every once in a while I check in on Nate to see what he's saying about things. And it's been interesting because basically the entire Trump presidency, his stance has kind of been like, look, I know you think Trump is unpopular, but he's not as unpopular as you probably would think. Now though, it's like, hey guys, the bottom might fall out here. He's more unpopular than ever. It went up like 2 points in a week. Gas is out of control. Nobody likes wars. And I think it's all a long-winded way to bring this back to the economy, which is I just don't really get it right now because the gas price, oil is skyrocketing. Inflation seems poised to roar back again. Like there's some estimates saying it could get up to like 4%. Um, and consumer sentiment is down. Yet the markets don't like stock markets don't seem to react very strongly to all this negative information. I mean, they're down like a couple percent, I think, since we've invaded Iran. They're actually like way up right now. I just pulled up Bloomberg. Um, as they think the war is coming to an end. We'll see, right? This happens all the time, and that's actually a great example of what I'm talking about because they really do seem to hang on every word that comes out of this administration. Traders, I'm talking about, and it just creates this. It creates the impression that the markets are more disconnected from the real economy and what's going on in the world than they have ever been before, and it just feels like something has to give at some point. And there's a lot of other things we could get into over, in other shows about private credit markets and stuff. But just fundamentally, it seems that there's a disconnect between what's going on and in the real economy and the markets, all of the markets, really.
Yeah, it's really hard for me to understand. Also, and I don't have any like background or knowledge in how any of this is supposed to work. But I don't know. It like, because part of me, what really confuses me is, in theory, these people are not like the traders, people operating in like international oil markets. Like they're not, they're paid to not be in like some sort of like partisan thrall to Trump. Like, the idea is that they're there to like independently analyze things and like figure out like, like what makes sense within the market. And so like it's like in some ways I'm like resistant. I'm like somewhat resistant to like the idea that they're just like getting like snookered by Trump all the time. But then they're also human, and so it's like, and I think there are some situations that are just like too damaging to like really like think through. Like I think like before COVID, like the economy, the stock market eventually crashed, but there was a couple weeks there, like a month even, where it was clear the COVID was spreading everywhere. It was going to be hugely disruptive, but like there was this like eerie kind of like calm. And I do wonder if it's like a similar thing where it's like such a big event that it's like hard to figure out how to price it in.
Yeah, it does feel like that. I agree, and I think it is sort of. I think. Have you seen Wolf of Wall Street?
Yeah,
Okay, you know in Wolf of Wall Street, like he walks into that one Investa Center, and the guys like doing the trades are like I don't know, they're just like schmucks. And I feel like one thing is that people forget that a lot of traders they might be rich as hell, but they're like basically schmucks. They don't know, like they don't know. I mean, Josh made the point about like commodities traders not being aware that there were no oil, there were no like ships literally delivering anything in the Strait of Hormuz, yet the commodities traders were unaware of this, right? It was just some guy on YouTube had figured it out. And I think that's part of it is like these people control lots of money, but they don't really have any more information than anybody else. And in many cases, they actually have less
right.
because they're basically bound to this one activity, and there are so many inputs into investing and everything. I think there's another thing that I find potentially more concerning, which is that if the markets are actually disconnected from the economy in a real way to the point where consumer sentiment doesn't matter that much anymore because so many of these large firms have created moats, for lack of a better word. Like a moat in business is like a moat is a term in business. It means your business is protected. It's like a basically a euphemism for a monopoly, and you can just collect rents. Um, and what I worry is that businesses have figured out a way to make money regardless of if their products and services are any good. Like, I mean, look at airlines. Like, airlines are terrible. Like, have you? I say this to people all the time. You've never met anyone in your life who said, "I just took a flight. It was better than the last flight I took." Like they don't get better. Airline experiences don't get better. They only get worse, but they keep making more and more money. And I just worry that like there's like the airlineification of the whole economy. Everything gets worse, but it doesn't matter because there's so much monopoly power and there's so much regulatory capture that places can make money anyway. And that's why you see markets going up even as people are getting poorer and buying less stuff. That's
Yeah.
my doomsday thesis.
Well, I think it's like sort of like it's sort of like a self reinforcing cycle, because it's like with the airline, for example, like, you know, as you say, like people are getting poorer, like inequality is getting bigger. Like I mean, I see all these stories talking about how the top like 10% of like people of income earners are basically holding up the whole economy because their spending is just like so ridiculous, wildly out of proportion to what anybody else can do. So if you're making pulling in like 500K a year, you can buy a new car, like a just spend all these like spend a lot of money on all these like lavish things
Yeah.
that then like promote like consumption elsewhere. But with the airline example, I'm like also like it. I don't want to be annoying here, but like, part of me is like, okay, so people are getting poorer, so they're going to lower prices to make sure that they can still fill planes, right? Which means that they're going to keep cutting services. So it's going to get like worse and worse as they like keep trying to compete in an environment where people have like less and less money. And so it's this like really like horribly like like self reinforcing cycle where the quality of everything gets worse, partly because everybody's poor, uh,
Yeah.
and so it's just like people just can't afford like things that are as nice. That being said, yeah. So I don't know.
They could pay themselves less.
That would be nice. That would be helpful.
I mean, I know that like if the CEO of I won't pick a specific airline, but like cut their salary, that wouldn't fix everything. But it is the case that these places benefit if it's the case that a company is benefiting by making worse stuff, you know, it just calls into question everything, right? Like I don't know enough about the airline industry itself. Like I imagine one of the problems is it's expensive to make planes. So it's hard for like a new entrant to come in and be like, look, I mean, I guess JetBlue did that, and maybe Spirit or Frontier. I feel like one of those is like newer. Um, but like it's got to be really hard to compete. And I think other industries where it is easier to compete, like they go out of their way to make it hard to compete. Like, and that's what um the that's a good we could I want to just bring up the Ticketmaster thing with Kid Rock. Okay, for a sec, because the
Did you see that
um
video, by the way, of the helicopters and him?
yeah, what was that?
It's,
Like,
or like the
we could
military.
do a Kid Rock episode. There's like a
Yeah,
lot of weird stuff
we
going
can try
on.
to have him on the show. But or
Yeah.
like, yeah, just for listeners, where the military like flew like Apache helicopters outside his house, just like for his like entertainment. It's crazy.
Yeah, insane.
Yeah,
So, but Kid Rock was very vocal about he was upset that the Trump administration settled antitrust lawsuit with Live Nation, and Ticketmaster, right? They're like one thing. And he was like, didn't understand this. He couldn't understand why, like, the Trump administration, who is on his side, would rule in a way that disadvantaged his fans, right? And you know, it's almost like, come on, man. Like that's the game. That's what these people are all about. It's like helping their friends who already have established businesses make more money by doing less. Simply by making it so that there are no other options, so that you have to pay them whatever they want you to pay them.
yeah,
And that's happening all over the place in industry after industry after industry. And yeah, it's bleak. It's bleak if there is no feedback loop between customers and businesses.
yeah.
Um,
There's something like
and yeah,
airlines too. It's hard because so much of it depends on like infrastructure that the government has to maintain. So if at the same time you also have this like movement for nobody to pay taxes and for like basically any attempt to do any kind of like public works immediately gets like blocked in Congress, then it's like it just means that everything's going to degrade, which is
yeah,
what we're seeing, right? Like I mean, they can't afford to hire air traffic controllers, they can't upgrade infrastructure. Like it's really
no,
it's not great.
this is a reason why Adam Smith said in Wealth of Nations that industries that require the government to do things are not going to be very good private businesses because it's not to the public's benefit for them to prioritize profit. I mean, he was like very open about that. Said
Yeah,
the same thing about hospitals and like roads and stuff. Um, and I think we see that play out. Like, there's a reason why utilities are utilities, and on some level, like flights are a kind of utility. Like, you have to do it. Um, so yeah, it's tough. And I think, I don't know, bringing it back to the oil. Uh, the signals from the Trump administration seem almost like we're just going to give up the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, I went and just read what Trump said. He says, like, I don't think we're going to be there that much longer, and as soon as we leave, the Strait of Hormuz will open. I
the,
don't will it?
the
I don't
problem is
will it? Like,
that they all say like everything at once. Because then like this morning, Pete Hegseth went and was like, "No, we're going to go in." Like, and he's like, and he actually, I think at some point he said like, "We're just trying to make." He like said to like in public to like reporters, like, "We're just trying to preserve the element of surprise." He said something like that, which is like so funny. But it's like but like I don't know, like
it,
it's just like maybe like Trump is just like he's just changing his mind every couple hours. So it's like it's so hard
yeah,
to know. Yeah.
yeah.
Um. I This all raises a question of patriotism, does it not? Uh,
I think it does. It certainly does, Josh. It does raise the question of patriotism.
so I think that's for our last segment. We're gonna discuss a sports issue. Do I intro this, Joe?
Yeah, so there was I you could see from my ball cap, if those of you who are listening only, you should be watching. For those of you watching, I got on my Team Italy baseball cap I got during the World Baseball Classic, which wrapped up a couple weeks ago. I found it was a thrilling year. I thought a thrilling World Baseball Classic. A lot of teams were having a lot of fun. Team Italy like shocked the world by making to the semifinals. Um, and all the while, there was the hulking favorite, the United States of America, Team USA, having zero fun. Zero fun. They had no fun. It looked like it was painful for them to play baseball. And there was this story. If you followed the World Baseball Classic, you might have seen that in an attempt to get the team like pumped up. Manager Mark DeRosa had a brilliant idea. He brought in one of the members of SEAL Team 6, the guys who killed Osama bin Laden. He brought in, yeah. And that guy, I forget the Navy SEAL's name. Um, but anyway, he was brought in to like get people hyped up. And this video made the rounds, and Robert O'Neill is the SEAL. I wanted to get his name. So this video made the rounds, and a lot of people had the same question, which is like, what is SEAL Team 6 and the military operation to kill terrorism have to do with playing baseball? And Michael Kay, who's announcer for the Yankees, wrote an article, or he said on his radio show, like, this kind of made me uneasy. It's kind of weird when you bring the flag into these sporting events, and you're trying to tell me that like winning the World Baseball Classic is on the same level as like the military and the army. And I come at it from a different angle a little bit, which is I do think it's weird whenever the military and sports interact. I thought it was weird back in the early aughts when we found out that the NFL was getting paid by the Department of Defense to, do these flyovers and all these military things. But the reason I think it's weird is because I think there's a correlation between the militarization of society and like all this tactical shit and people just not having fun. Like baseball is a game where you have fun. The fact that you thought it would be a good idea to bring in a SEAL Team 6 guy to get the people hyped up, and the fact that everyone is saying like I'm playing baseball for the troops, like why? It's a kids game. Just play to have fun. Like you look at the Dominican Republic, they're playing for their teammates and for their country to have fun. You look at Team Italy, they're playing for other. I mean, it was mostly Italian Americans. They're playing to have fun. They're drinking espresso in the dugout. Team Venezuela invents a new dance every 5 seconds, and then you have the Americans who are like, it's like they'd rather be doing anything else than playing baseball. And it's like maybe because you're comparing it to war, like
Yeah,
I don't know, just chill out.
it is crazy. It also reminds me because I think like like football for the longest time like kind of had that culture where it was like the military do flyovers at games, like it was much more like some for whatever reason like attached to like the military and these like really like public aggressive like expressions of patriotism. But baseball hasn't had that. I don't know if it's because it's more international, like as you were like talking about, like a bunch of other countries play the sport or what. But like I don't like love like seeing that because also it's like it's supposed to be the national pastime. You don't have to have like yeah, like it seems like over in addition to like being like over like super overly serious, like wearing
Yeah.
a camo hat and like talking about like dead soldiers or whatever. It's like it also just seems like it's just like kind of like overkill to like
Yeah. It's just too much.
bring all this in. Yeah.
I think it's like it's really like a projection in a sense of like self-worth. I think because like Mark DeRosa was asked by um a reporter from Defector, um like why what would you say to people basically who think this is weird? That's not the way she asked the question, but like basically. And he said, I was talking to Paul Skeens, the pitcher for the Pirates, and he said, when I signed up for this, I want to do this for every serviceman and woman that protects our freedom. That's why we wear USA across our chest. And it's like, it's just baseball. It's just baseball. And I don't know why we bring the military into these things. Like the military, like everything we do in America is like, if we ever are have USA or we wear something that's like red, white, and blue, it's for the military. Like I don't know where this ethos came from that we all have to be like worshipful of the military like at all times. I find it very strange. Ties back to Kid Rock when he did that when that helicopter flew over, he like saluted it or whatever and said, Gavin Newsom doesn't know anything about this level of respect. Almost like performative patriotism, performative respect for the military. There was another incident during the WBC where like Team America's catcher and I think it was Team Mexico's batter, the batter from Mexico, they play together on the same team in real life. They play for the Mariners, and the batter went to like give him a handshake, and Team America's catcher Cal Raleigh like wouldn't give him a handshake because they're like they're competing right now. And it's like, dude, okay, like come
Yeah.
on. Again, you were
Yeah.
taking this way too seriously. This is
I
a
know.
kids game,
Yeah.
and like it's almost, I would go so far as like say it was a bad representation of America that we take, to your point, you take everything, you just make it way too serious because it's almost like they can't accept that they just play a kids game. Like, and that's not enough for them. It's not enough for them that they have fans and kids look up to them and they make a ton of money and they make people happy. They have to say, I'm doing this for the military. Like, okay, I don't know. Kids,
Yeah,
doing it for kids would be enough for me.
yeah, and they're also signing like $500 million contracts. So
Yeah.
let's be real.
Yeah,
Um,
you could donate to Wounded Warriors or something like that's far more meaningful than having the SEAL Team 6 guy come in and talk about raiding Osama bin Laden.
yeah, it's bizarre. Well, but this does make me want to go to a ball game and eat a hot dog.
We should go, yeah.
Should. But anyway, I think this was a good first episode. We're happy to be
Yeah.
back at the TPM Social Club, and we'll be coming. I think we'll be returning to you not next week, but the week after with a guest to be revealed at the time of the episode. Yeah, Joe, it's I'm glad to be doing this again.
I'm glad to be back. A couple housekeeping notes. If you're not a TPM member, we're having a membership drive right now. Head over to the site, 25% off. Um, Also, Josh mentioned we're not going to have a show next week. That's because Josh and I will both be in Texas. Our TPM's other podcast. I was going to say flagship, but I don't know if I want to give him that. Josh Marshall and Kate Riga, their podcast live from Austin. If you want to go to that, tickets are on sale. Head over to the site and get tickets for that. Otherwise, you should look for the TPM Social Club. Wherever you get your podcasts, we'll be on YouTube soon. Like and subscribe. Liking and subscribing is going to be very important. We're going to beat you over the head with those requests. So
Yeah, and if you want to, we're talking at the beginning about influencers, but if you want to contribute to a more positive vision of influencing, you can you can like and subscribe to
yeah,
our podcast.
exactly.
Yeah, but yeah, thanks a lot.